Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Reifner. I'm with Western Lighting and Energy Control Solutions, your Lutron rep for Southern California. We are going to kick this off at about 9:01. Give everybody a chance to get logged on and get their cup of coffee ready. My partner in crime today, or the primary partner today, is Mr. Mark Gasper from Lutron Electronics, and he is here also. So we'll kick it off in about 1 minute. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today on our webinar, Living in a Material World, starring Mark Gasper from Lutron Electronics. My name is Jim Reifsnyder. I'm with Western Lighting and Energy Control Solutions, your local Lutron rep. We do really appreciate the time that you're able to take and join us today for this awesome CEU. Had the opportunity to see this one already, and it's a very informative one. I learned a lot of new things, and I believe it'll be informative for you as well. Couple quick housekeeping things. We will be recording this webinar for you. So, if you want to watch it later, it'll end up being on our Western Lighting and Energy Controls website under our Lightflix channel. So if you get bored and you've watched all of the Netflix episodes you can handle, you can jump over to our website and watch this one. We'll also make the presentation available. For any questions, if you can, please just type them into the question text box, and I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. I just wanted to say I hope everyone's family is doing well and during these new and challenging times. And if there's anything that Western Lighting and Energy Controls can do to help you with specification sales, lighting, controls, anything, we're a resource for you, as well as our friends from Lutron Electronics. There's over 80 people in Southern California that work primarily with Lutron. So we're here to help and support any of your needs in a commercial or residential way. So without any further ado, I'll hand the football to Mr. Mark Gasper from Lutron Electronics. Any of you who know Mark will be shocked to see he is not wearing a white Lutron shirt. I have not seen him in one in some time, so it's the only positive to this whole thing that I can think of, other than spending some more time with my kids. But Mr. Mark, thank you for today. We really appreciate you helping us out.
Okay, am I still good?
You are good.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, Jim, I can't wear my white shirts because my dry cleaner's closed, so I got to dig a little deeper into my closet to get stuff. So hello, everybody. Just a couple seconds. I thought I'd show my face just so you know there's a real human being back there behind what we're doing. I want to echo Jim's thoughts. Thank you for joining us. Trying times, but at Lutron, we're trying to make the best of it, and I hope you and your families and businesses are doing the same. So just a little brief introduction on me. Started my career, graduated out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Marquette, and then was with several lighting companies. So Timely Lighting out of Cleveland, American Lantern out of the South, then went to Lightlear. And then about 20 plus years ago, I joined the Lutron team. So I'm with them ever since. How I got involved in shades is Lutron, involved in lighting controls, decided that, the biggest light source of all is the sun. We started making our own motorized shading, kind of made a hash of it, to be honest with you. So what we decided to do at one point is let's go out and buy a shade manufacturing company, which was Vimco at the time out of Richmond, Virginia. That was about 12 years ago. We kind of got rid of the name and just made it Lutron Shading. But so I've been, intimately involved in the sale, specification, and working with our shades for 12 or 13 years. So consider myself pretty well rounded on the, aspects of shading. A couple keys on this presentation. It's a new one with Lutron, which is exciting. It's the first time I've actually presented it, and there's a lot of good information here for you guys, especially if you're the one deciding what shade to pick out. It's also, you'll see it's highly residential pictured, but I'll tell you the information that we're going to talk about applies equally to commercial as well as residential as far as openness factors, decreasing heat gain, stopping UV, what to do in wet or humid environments, how different kinds of fabrics affect the light that comes through them. So very, very knowledgeable. I encourage you to stay on the webinar, even if you're 100% commercially focused. All right, so I'm going to end my face and we're going to get on into the presentation. Okay. First of all, this is AIA approved for CEU accreditation. So here's like the official stamp that we have. So it is approved for AIA. We have filed for ASID, but not ASID, the IDCEC, the Interior Design Coalition. They are, for some reason, always slower at approving new courses than the AIA is. So although I can't say this strategy will work, if you are an interior designer on this, I would still get us the information. We can send you the diploma for getting it. And if it is approved by the IDCEC, it doesn't hurt to say you took the class. They may or may not grant you the credits for it, but they generally do approve everything Lutron throws at them. It just seems to take an extra month or two for the IDCEC to get that approval for us. So here's the relevant information. If you haven't already submitted this to Western, want to thank them for allowing me to host this presentation for you. Then take a screenshot of this or whip out your phone and take a picture of it. The information we need from you is in the red box. So we need your first and last name, your email, phone number in case we have a question, what your company is and what your AIA membership number is, and we will file for that credit for you personally. Any questions on that, let me know. All right, so standard CEU procedures, really standard procedures for anyone involved in training. The steps of training is you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Well, this is the first part of that, where this is what you should learn by the end of the presentation here. But to be able to intelligently select roller sheet fabrics for homes relating to the comfort of the people, how to take into consideration things like the environment, whether it's sleeping spaces, spaces with a lot of noise, and the correct selection of fabrics to maximize or minimize, in many cases, different aspects of the environment. How color affects light coming in through a window, how the structure and weave and texture of the fabric will have subtle variations, and how you can use that to your advantage, and also help you identify the appropriate level of fabric opacity. So that's how much light comes through the fabric. We'll talk more about that in different rooms and different applications. And then also to understand how the material affects the shade's ability to protect the interior. So is it, fiberglass, is it polyester? We're going to cover all that. So how this is going to work is the next couple of slides are just going to be talking about why shades are important generally, why people like them, what are the advantages of having shades. Then we're going to do a little bit on how motorization, is key and becoming more and more important for people. And then after those few initial slides, we're going to dive right down into fabric considerations and why one fabric may be better for your application than another. All right, so why do we use shades in a home? Well, point number one there, protect homes from heat and UV damage. I'm sure all of you have been in front of a window on a hot summer day that the shade was not down and the window actually amplifies heat. It really gets hot, really gets toasty very, very quickly if you don't have something protecting that light from getting to you from that open window. UV damage, I'm sure you worked with clients either commercially or residentially that have expensive furnishings, artwork. Anyone who's left anything out in the backyard for too long that's very colorful will notice in the space of like half a summer that the colors are not so vibrant. The UV just breaks down that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about what fabrics are best at protecting and keeping those colors and keeping those things vibrant. I'll never forget one job I went to in Corona del Mar a couple years ago. They had this beautiful wood floor, and the people, I guess, hadn't rearranged their furnishing for a long time. But when they moved the furniture, you could see where the couches and the sofas were, because underneath that, the floor looked gorgeous. But then as soon as you got out of where that was hidden from the sunlight, the rest of the stuff, it was all bleached out. It was really startling to see how much that sunlight had damaged that floor over time. Second point, a room darkening for sleeping or more enjoyable viewing experience. So, what to do in bedrooms versus what you want to do in living rooms. Privacy is a big concern with a lot of people, making sure in the evening or in your bedrooms where you're not going to be fully dressed, not having people giving you the ability to peek in. A lot of the homes we do at Lutron are, rich, expensive people on the beach. And as you know, in California, there's open beach policies. So, they don't want people walking up and down the beach and peering back into the house. So what kind of fabrics will stop that and give them the privacy so that they're not having people looking in when they don't want them in the evenings. All right, let's talk about shade automation for a slide. So what can automation or motorization of the shades do for you? First of all, under the comfort and convenience category there, the intelligent scheduling. So you may know, for instance, that at 10 a.m. it starts to get too hot and it's going to stay that way till 6 p.m. So whether you're there or not, the shades can be programmed to come down or to block the light during those hours. Hard to reach or tall windows. So, if the shade is difficult to get to, you got to reach over the sofa, or it's the top of the stairs. Or what I'll see is they've got, 8 windows, and you've got some 90-pound grandma trying to pull chain some 20-foot shade and having to tug. It's difficult for them to do that, and it's much easier and nicer just hit a button and have that happen automatically. And then having the shades move all together in unison at the touch of a button, rather than have to go around the room and play with 5 or 6 different pull cords and try and adjust them. It's just a nicer, easier operation of the shading. On the aesthetics issue, perfect alignment through movement. So that's one of the nice things about the motorization of shades, is whether it's a big shade or a little shade, they'll move in the same motion at the same time at the same level. In the past, for instance, if you had a big shade next to a little shade, the little shade, since it had less weight on the fabric, will just run right up there, and then the larger shade with the more weight will be a foot or 2 behind it as it travels up or down the channel. With things like intelligent hen bar alignment these days, you can have it so that the shades always move in unison and they're always at the exact same level, regardless of what size the shade they are. By using motorized shades, there's no unsightly cords or chains or things to impact the environment. So, we're looking at this picture right here. That looks like it's probably a 15 to 16 foot window there. I'm sure you can imagine how ugly it would be to have pull chains on those. So you'd have a pull chain right from that ceiling to the bottom that would, clatter against the windows and against the molding there, just be unsightly. So it's nice to have the motorized shades that will move on their own. And then also, again, another example here in the photo here, the idea of a pocket, of being able to pull that shade up there, have all that hardware hidden. So when you want full light, the shade practically vanishes. It just pulls all the way up. There's a little inch or 2 slit up there that the fabric travels beneath, and you'll never know it's there until you want the shade to come down automatically. So what are your control considerations for shades? Well, we're looking at 4 of them right here. They're the typical ways. So you can manually control a shade, obviously. So that's a pull down shade that you see there. The other option for manual shades, again, is the beaded chain, the beaded cord chain. Then there is when you start getting in the motorization, you can have wall controls. So you can have one of those buttons on that keypad there designated to drop down the blackouts or the sunscreen shades. And then also you'll see the iPhone there. So, or whatever you're using. It could be a Amazon or a Google style of phone. But those are also very handy because be honest with you, if you have a lot of shades in a room, having a wall control like you see in the second picture there with 8 or 9 buttons, one for every individual shade is kind of ridiculous. It creates a lot of wall acne. So what we'll do in a lot of cases is have a button that drops all the blackouts, or another button that drops all the sheer shades down. But then if for some reason they wanted individual control, they could go to their app and select the first shade or the second shade or the fourth shade and adjust that one independently. So maybe there's a deer out in the front yard or some squirrels playing, or whatever reason you want to raise or lower just one individual shades. You don't need to have a hard button on it. You can access that one shade from your phone. And then finally, voice control. I mean, I think everybody at this point is familiar with, Amazon Alexa or the Google Home Assistant. There's even some more professional voice control systems like Josh AI coming out. So there is more and more ability to control shades either as groups or individually through voice control. Some startling statistics here. So almost 90% of the time is spent indoors, and an amazing 80% of that time is spent in a residence, which seems a lot, but when you think about it, we're probably home 14 hours a day and then all the time on the weekend. So we are spending, a substantial amount of our time in the residence. So this is not something that Lutron cooked up. You'll see down in the lower corner. This is from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency study. And I tell you, if I had that view from this picture right here, I don't think I would ever leave this room. I mean, that's just a gorgeous view. I have no idea where this is, but I'm sure whoever owns that home spends a lot of time looking out that window. All right, so what do you need to think about on your either commercial or residential clients when you're considering, what's the best shade application for them? So first of all, the location of the shade in the home. Is it in the living room, where they're probably most concerned about cutting light but still maintaining visibility, because that's usually looking out over, the most attractive part of the landscape. Window orientation is important. For instance, if you're doing a job here in Southern California, we're going to get most of our light from the south and from the west. So some from the north, a little more from the east, especially in the morning as the sun rises, but the ones where the most intense sun penetration is, again, from the south and from the west. So a lot of the savvy window specifiers will, they'll pick a color, or for the home, let's say it's a charcoal or it's an oyster or some fabric of that color, but they'll vary the openness, which is how much light comes through. We'll talk about that more in a second or two, based on the orientation. So maybe in the north and the east, we have a more open pattern since we're not getting as intense sunlight from there. But again, in your south and your western facings, you want a tighter weave because you're going to have much more intense light coming from those directions. Point number 2, the aesthetic performance. So what does you need the shade look like from the inside? What do you want it to look like from the outside? There's a lot of cases in HOAs, homeowner associations, or communities that will specify that, they don't want one floor or one home having a gray on the outside, another one having a black, and another one having a blue or a pink. So a lot of those organizations will specify what the fabric or what they want to appear from the outside of the house so that it doesn't look like a mess of different colors in the windows. Thermal performance, how much heat gain do you want from the shade or reflecting the heat out? Acoustic performance, so noise levels. And then for your client, you want to optimize the daylight levels. So you want to maintain a good view outside while reflecting a lot of the light and heat back out. You want to make sure it's not too glary. And again, these people in these expensive homes have paid for, like in this picture here, a beautiful mountain scene or looking out over the ocean. They want to maintain those views for as long, as possible without having to worry about it being too glary. I'll just mention, if you're working on homes near the ocean or near lakes or anything like that, a lot of people forget about just how much light reflects from water. So like if you've got a home looking over the Pacific Ocean there in the evening, the sun going down in the west, there's more than you would expect if you haven't seen this before, but when the western sun sets, that light is hitting off that ocean and it's bouncing right into your eyes if you're looking out at the sunset. So that's why one of the things we need to worry about here in California is that western view and making sure that we take in consideration how much light we really get not only from the sun, but also from it bouncing off, as I said, water and other things in the area. Okay, so let's dive straight into the fabric considerations. So that's what the bulk of this presentation is about, is what fabrics are available, what are the right choices for different applications. And this is kind of a roadmap for what we're going to talk about. So these 9 factors will influence your selection. So we're going to talk about each one of these, and we're going to talk generically about it. I'm going to throw a little caveat here that we're going to do the CEU, and CEUs are designed to be non-denominational. But at the end of the CEU, we're going to cut it. And then if you want to find out how or where to find this information at Lutron, I'll spend a couple slides on that so you can, know what you learned today, how to find this information to make your proper choices at the end of the CEU. But the 9 different things we're going to talk about, and there'll be slides on each one of these, is the openness factor, the color, the weave of the fabric, what is the fabric made of, the fabric composition, acoustic considerations, so if you have noise, making sure that doesn't bounce around the room. Then the heat issues, getting rid of the heat, the UV, getting rid of the UV so you're not damaging furnishings and damaging pictures. Privacy issues, bedrooms, environmental factors like high humidity. What do you want to use where you've got a wet or damp environment? You got to put a shade in a bathroom. There's certain considerations you need to take into effect. And then the VOC, that's the volatile organic, the new car smell kind of stuff. So some people are very sensitive to that. What are your options on reducing or eliminating that new car smell? Let's jump in. So openness factor. This is basically, you boil it right down, it's how many holes are in the fabric and how big they are and how much light comes in. So this is a variable. So when you get into sunscreens or sheer shades, you can determine how much light is going to penetrate through that fabric. So with your architectural fabrics, these are ones that we consider for performance. The general range is anywhere from 0 to 10%, as you see on the bottom of the screen. So on your far left there, you've got a blackout shade where just nothing's coming through. In the middle, you've got a 3% shade, which allows you to see out a bit. You can tell it's certainly a city. You can see the different buildings out there. And then on the far right-hand side, you've got a 10% fabric, which you can see really good. So you can see virtually every detail through that. You're just reflecting, 90% of that light back out. So you're not getting that heat gain into the room, but you still got a nice ability to enjoy your cityscape or seascape or whatever you've got on the backside of that building. So it works in a percentage. The larger the number, the more light comes in. So a 15% openness factor is going to let more light in than a 10%. Generally, once you hit above 10%, so you got you start to lose stability in the fabric. Some of your more decorative, fabrics can go higher than that. And they're kind of gauzy looking. So I have seen fabrics as high as a 15 or 16%. But after that, the stability, the strength, the durability of the fabric drops off quickly. So generally, as I said earlier, the architectural ones, the sunscreens and ones, will top out at about 10, and you will find some gauzy, more decorative fabrics that will approach 15 or 16%, but I really haven't seen anything beyond that you would want to use and put up in your window that's going to, be up there for 6, 7, 8, 9 years without basically falling apart because the weave isn't tight enough. Color. So how does the color of the fabric affect the people in the building? Well, I'm going to say something here that if you're new to shading, it seems completely contradictory. But if you want to maximize your outside view, you want a dark colored fabric. So when you talk to somebody who hasn't been involved with shades before, it sounds completely intuitive. You say, if I want to see out better, I think I want a lighter fabric, but the exact opposite is what's true. So if you do have a light colored fabric, so a white or a beige or something, that's less dark, the good parts about it is it does reflect the heat back. So The best example of this outside of shading is, I'm sure all of you have been out on a hot summer day. You know, if your choices in your wardrobe are a black t-shirt or a white t-shirt, you're probably going to choose the white one. Why? Because it reflects a lot of that light out. It just doesn't feel as hot. Where if you wear that black one, it's going to absorb more of that light, and you're going to sweat, and, you know, you're going to feel that effect of that temperature a lot more. So a light colored shade has that same ability. It's going to reflect a lot of that light back out into the, you know, outside air. Second bullet point under the light colored fabrics is it can create glare. So once again, you know, a white color does reflect light. So if I look back, I'm going to back up a slide here, a couple slides. On this openness factor, you see all the little, you know, squares there. Imagine a light coming into that. It's going to hit those squares and start to bounce around. So you can sometimes get glare because, again, the white colored strands are reflecting the light not only back out, but amongst themselves either. It kind of creates like a haze around a white shadow. I think we've got a photo coming up to show you that effect on a slide or two later. Let's move on to the dark colored fabric. So as I said, and again, we'll demonstrate this with a slide in the future, you will be able to see out better from a dark colored fabric. That contrast is easier on the eye, and it allows you to see your vision out further. It does reduce the brightness in the room. But one of the negatives about a dark colored fabric sometimes is it absorbs extra heat. Again, going back to that t-shirt, you're going to feel hotter because it is absorbing that heat. Same thing with the black strands in the fabric. It will absorb heat, and you'll have more heat gain in that room with a black colored fabric than you would if it was white. So here's a great set of slides here. So on the left, you've got a dark colored fabric. On the right, you've got a white colored fabric. And if you look at the bottom, notice that as we move from left to right, the openness changes. So it goes from a 10% to a 5% to a 3% to a 1%. So when you're working with sheer shades, in a lot of cases, you have this kind of opportunity to specify how tight the weave is. So with the 10% of the dark versus the white, I think everybody will agree you can certainly see through it a lot better. On the white one, the last two ones there, you can barely see through. If I didn't see the other pictures, I could not tell you what I'm looking at through that shade. So again, just reiterating that you will see out better with a dark colored fabric. It provides a better contrast ratio, allows your eyes to focus on what's out there. It doesn't have that, not blinding, but that effect of the light bouncing off and that hazy white glare that you'll see in the white colored fabrics. The second ability of a shade fabric that will affect how you see through it or why you may want to choose it is the weave, or how it's sewn together. So there are three basic types of weave that we're going to talk about. The first one is a basket weave, which is your strongest, your most durable. You'll make shades widest, longest with basket weave, and it's just how it's sewn together. So what we're looking at in the picture there is a 2x2, so you've got two strands going over and under two strands, so a very, uniform. But you can also have a 1x1 or a 1x2. It really, doesn't matter, but that's what we call a basket weave type of a shade. Those are typically the ones that are going to be the strongest, the most durable, because they've got a, a very defined, a very knit type of pattern to it. Now the second category, and again, we'll talk about these individually, is a twill. So a twill is a basket weave, but the difference with a twill is you're using multiple color yarns. So this is where you'll have one side of the fabric, one color, typically a light color, and then the other side maybe a dark color. So you'll notice in the picture there, we're seeing more of the black thread and less of the white. If we were to flip that one over, we'd see more white than black. So you'll notice the black, it goes like over 2 and under 1, over 2 and under 1. So we're going to have more of a black appearance on this side and more of a white appearance on the other. We'll talk about why that's important, but there are some times when you want the black side in for visibility, but you want the white side out to reflect that heat. So it's kind of a dual purpose fabric, allowing you to do two jobs at once. And then when you start getting into your more decorative fabrics, there's like knitted fabrics, like you see there on the bottom. The difficulty with those are they're not as structurally strong. Usually you can't sew two of those fabrics together. They tend to fray a lot and are not as dimensionally strong, but they do provide more of a, there's not a really good for it, but more of a fabric-y feel. So it's, you know, some of the designers and homeowners like that because it's the texture of the fabric is more, it's more like a sweater versus the other ones. So you have, you know, a friendlier, nicer feel to those fabrics. So let's take a look at some examples. So here on the basket weave, again, what we're looking at on the first picture is a 2x2 weave. It looks kind of industrial, you know, kind of tough, hard quality versus a 1x2 on the other side. So that's still a basket weave, but that one has a little bit more of a friendlier, you know, you could tell if you were going to touch that, it's a more, you know, a nicer feel to it. So once again, the basket weave is the best for stability. You can have different orientations, 1x1 or 2x2. And then the final bullet point there, when you start going like with a 1x2, it does start to have more of a pattern or more feel, decorative look to it. Twills. So twills, as I mentioned earlier, is a form of basket weave, but typically what defines a twill is that you're using two different color yarns. So if you look at the picture there, one is gray, the other side is white. So different color orientation. The typical choice is that you want, and we showed the pictures of this earlier, you want the dark side in the room so that when you're looking through it, you're maintaining the best view of the scenery outside. And then having that white on the side away from you, facing the sun, will optimize the amount of light and heat that's reflected back out of that shade. So that's where these kind have like best of both worlds. This is also another option here where you do have a standard where someone may say on the outside of the building, I want everything to have a, you know, a white appearance, but then you can have some individuality in the room. Since you're using the two-sided fabric, you could have, you know, a brown or a beige or a biscuit or something on the side, on the inside. So still give that homeowner or that business owner the ability to customize what he's looking at from inside the building and yet maintaining the same look on the outside. And the knitted fabric, as I mentioned, these are, you know, very soft, very nice, very friendly to the touch. Usually a very decorative fabric. You might see patterns or designs or different logos on them, but very delicate, not as dimensionally strong. They can usually not be sewn together. So that's the knitted form of the fabric here. Okay, so we talked about how it's woven. What about what it's made of? Does this affect the shade? As you can guess, it certainly does. So there's two primary styles of core that are used in the fabric. So what are the individual strands? Fiberglass and polyester. So we're going to give you, you know, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each. We'll start with fiberglass. So fiberglass is super strong. It's like aircraft steel. It's like, you know, spiderweb silk. It's very tiny, but for its size, it is amazingly strong and stable. So this is the best fabric to use when you don't want sagging. You've got wide shades and you don't want the little smile down the middle because the fabric's pulling on itself and creating its own little wrinkles. It tends to be lightweight since it's very skinny. And we'll show pictures of this. It also enhances your view outside. So the smaller the thread, the easier the, you know, that means there's more holes in the fabric. When we talk about the openness, it allows you to see through it better. So you'll see a picture of that coming up. What are the fallbacks or limitations of fiberglass? It's not easily recyclable. So this is a lead job, or the homeowner is very concerned about, you know, waste and being able to recycle that waste. These fiberglass ones are not so friendly to that. Another limitation is since it is strong and it's like a sheet of paper. If you put a hard bend in the sheet of paper, nearly impossible to get that out. right? It's always going to be there. It has that memory where it's been folded hard, and you're never going to make that sheet of paper look like it just came out of the, the ream. Same thing kind of here with these fiberglass ones. So if they're going to be handled, they're going to be bent, you got a lot of kids around, these kind of things, that fabric will have memory if it's bent at a hard angle. So then we compare that to the polyester. So this is a thicker fabric. It's still pretty strong, but not as strong as the fiberglass. You are able to get creases and dents out of the fabric easier if you let it fall out, if you heat it up a little bit. Sometimes those creases and bends will fall out. Notice that since this fabric has that stretchy ability, it can stretch over time. So, one of the liabilities of a polyester one is, your shade installer may come out and level that shade and have it perfectly, 1/8 of an inch above that windowsill. 4 weeks later, when that fabric stretches, the bottom hem bar may be laying on the windowsill because it's just stretched, it's expands, it's relaxed. Kind of like my waistline over COVID here. So it's gonna stretch, and so that installer may have to come back out, 2 or 3 weeks later after that fabric's done stretching, and reset those bottom limits. As you'll see there, some of the shade manufacturers of the material have started taking that into account, and they will, pre-stretch it. So they'll hang it, let it fall out for a couple weeks, then roll it up on the tube and send it to the manufacturer. But that's something you would need to check. The fiberglass ones, as opposed to the polyester ones, are better for intense heat. So for instance, my company, we only use fiberglass for skylight shades, for tension shades where it's pulled from both sides. The reason for that is it's just that tough durability. It's not going to stretch. You're not going to have, like if you had this in a skylight shade, you don't want that shade bowing down because the fabric stretched. And quite frankly, the most amount of heat you're going to get in the shade is from a skylight. So imagine that above your head in that bright California 100-degree day, that's going to get very, very hot in there. So you want the toughest, strongest, least bendable fabric to be what is getting that sunlight. So here's an interesting picture. So once again, we're still on the fiberglass versus polyester discussion here. So on the left side, you've got fiberglass. On the right side, you've got polyester. Notice both of them are at 3% openness factor. So 3% OF stands for that. So the same amount of light is coming through both fabrics. But what you'll notice on the fiberglass one, as I mentioned earlier, that is a smaller, tighter strand. So there are more holes, more smaller holes on that one versus the polyester. Again, the same amount of light coming through, but you'll see on the polyester side, there's less holes and they're bigger. What's very interesting to me and to most people who see this slide is how much better your eye sees through the fiberglass one. So you've got an M on there, unless you're colorblind. And what you can see on the fiberglass side is you can probably see the little feet on the bottom of the M and the little like ears at the top of the M. When you look at the polyester one, at least me, I can't discern those. Right? And the reason for that is your eye, since there are more holes, your eye is able to, connect the dots basically and allow you to see through that better. Your eye can, anticipate what's behind there. So it's a much easier to look through a fiberglass shade than a polyester because more holes is friendlier to the eye than having less holes, even if they're bigger holes. So if you do want to look outside, again, the fiberglass is going to give you a better visibility. If you are going to imprint like a pattern or, business hours when the store's open, when the shade's down, you'd want to use that on the fiberglass. You're going to obviously, from this an example here, see that image much more vividly. All right, so we do have a couple questions in here. So I'll give everyone a couple seconds to think about the pros and cons of each answer. But when you need a shade for a window that is very large, which fabric is better, polyester or fiberglass? The answer is fiberglass again. Well, there's several variables contributing to the suitability for large shades. There's no guarantee that the fiberglass core is stronger than the polyester. So it's going to do better over large windows than the polyester one. It's just a more stable, stronger material. Let's talk about sound, acoustic performance. So the first caveat is this has nothing to do with sound coming in from the street, right? So if you're in New York City and you've got, everybody loves to honk their horn in New York City, you got one of those streets out front of your house, a row of shade is not going to do you much good. If you're looking for a shade to help dampen that noise, the only thing that works is mass. So you want a drapery, you want a heavy Roman, or a drapey that's lined with a very thick cloth. That's what's going to stop noise from coming in to the room. What we're talking about with this series of slides here is what happens once you're in the room. How do you stop sound from echoing around that house or that room? So what you want to look for on a fabric is the NRC, the noise reduction coefficient, right? That tells you how much noise is bouncing off that fabric. So once again, this is a 0 to a 1 scale. 1, as you see on the bottom picture, means it's absorbing all the sound. That'd be perfect. So no sound is reflecting off that surface. 0 means everything you throw at it is coming back as an echo. As you can guess, fabrics are somewhere in the middle. Anything that has a 0.5 or better, we consider pretty good for noise reduction coefficient. That means half the noise shot at it is being absorbed by the fabric. Things to look at that will help the noise coefficient is the thickness, the density, the openness factor has a lot to do with it. But if you're working with a reputable shade manufacturer or fabric manufacturer, they will tell you or can tell you what the noise coefficient is for each fabric that you choose or want to use in your application. So noise is one thing where it bounces off. There's also noise in the fabric, believe it or not. So, some of the new motor technology and shades are just super, super quiet. But you'll still may hear some noise when the shade's moving up or down. And a lot of that is actually the fabric itself when it rolls up on itself, when it releases. Things like static have a lot to do with the noise of the fabric. So just the same thing like when you shuffle your feet and touch a doorknob and get a shock, that same kind of static charge can build up on the shades themselves. So a lot of times we'll see like noise being important for a sound room or for a bedroom where they don't want to hear that. And the biggest violator for noisy shades are blackouts. The sunscreens like the polyester and fiberglass ones we talked about, they're kind of coated, they're kind of slick, they kind of, they rub up against each other and come off without a lot of noise. But when you get a plastic or a solid sheet of fabric up there, that's the ones that tend to make the most noise when they uncurl. So what you want to look for if you're really concerned about minimizing that fabric sound as the fabric rolls up against itself and unravels is a flocked background. So you may have seen these in California, the Christmas trees that are flocked where they like spray the white over it to make it look like snow and that kind of stuff. That's basically what flocking is. And flocking on a blackout shade, for instance, is on the back side. The manufacturer will actually shoot these minute particles on the back of that shade so that it's not one continuous sheet of plastic, that you got all these little bumps and ridges from that flocking. And that will help keeping the fabric from sticking to itself and creating that noise. So your more expensive blackout shades, a lot of them will have that flocking. And if noise is, material noise is something you're looking to eliminate on your projects, would highly recommend you to take a look and see if that fabric has a flocking on the back of it. All right, so here's another question. Which openness factor is likely to have the highest noise reduction value? So a blackout shade, a 1% shade, or a 10% shade? Give you a couple seconds to think about your answer. All right, here's the response. This is kind of a trick question. Again, if you're not into shading a lot, you probably said the blackout fabric. Why is that not the right answer? Well, think about it. The blackout fabric is a complete non-light penetrating panel, and the noise is going to bounce off of that. So the 1% is actually the best because it will let some of the noise penetrate and keep it from coming back out. But typically 1% fabrics have the highest noise reduction value. So once again, when you pick your fabric, this is something the shade manufacturer or the fabric manufacturer should make available to you, is what the noise reduction coefficient for each of those fabrics are. The higher the number, the less sound that's going to bounce off of it. Heat and UV. We don't want heat in the room typically. We don't want the UV rays that damage colors and fabrics and paintings and that kind of thing. How can shades help with those? All right, probably again, one of the first things that's not so intuitive is that heat and UV are not the same, right? My favorite example there is, I'm sure you've been camping or been, you know, at night with a fire going, right? Is there heat there? Absolutely. You stick your hand near that fire, it's going to get toasty, it's going to get burned, it's going to get hot. But I defy you to ever get a suntan from a fire, right? It just does not produce UV, but it does produce heat, all right? Look at the other side of the spectrum. I'm sure some of you out there are skiers, you know, Mammoth or Big Bear, or maybe get up to Vail or other such places. You know, you can get out there and be just freezing cold, right? And the rookie mistake skiing is thinking that you're fine and not putting on any suntan stuff, lotion, right? Because you can get one whale of a sunburn on the coldest day if you're out there unprotected, because UV is different than heat. So ultraviolet is completely different. They're basically at different ends of the spectrum. So if you look at the visible spectrum on the lower end, you know, when you get into your reds and your oranges, like sunrise and sunset, that's the UV range. And then the top, when you get into your blues and your violets, that's the ultraviolet range. So they're completely different kinds of wavelengths, heat and UV. And you have to, honestly, on your shades, treat them differently. So we'll talk about how you minimize heat, and we'll talk about how you minimize UV, but they're going to be two different answers. A lot of people think they should be the same. All right. So this is probably the most complicated slide in the whole presentation. But the idea, you see the sun there with the arrow coming down, that's the sun shooting light at your window. So one of three things happens when that sunlight hits your window shade. Part of it comes through. That's the solar transmittance. So that TS, transmitted sunlight, is what it stands for. That has all to do with your openness factor. So if it's a 10% openness factor, 10% of light's coming through. If it's a 1%, only 1% is coming through. So that's how much light is coming into the room. Above that, you see solar absorption. That's the heat that the fabric absorbs. So if 90% of 10% is coming in, that means 90% is not. Some of that is going to be absorbed by the fabric itself. So the fabric is going to get hot. You touch that fabric in the middle of the night versus in the daytime, you're going to definitely see a different, you know, temperature on that fabric. And then the other one at the bottom left is solar reflectance. So how much light is basically reflected back out into space. So if the solar energy coming into the window is 100%, those other three, the absorption, the transmittance, and the reflections, you know, those three will add up to be 100 as well. And you're just playing with those variables. Is more light coming into the room? Is more being absorbed by the fabric? Or is more being, you know, kicked back out into the space? What has this to do with heat and UV? Well, there's different strategies here. So if you're trying to have a minimum amount of heat come into the room, you know, maybe you can lower your HVAC, you want a white backed fabric. Why? Because white, as we talked about, even with your t-shirt, when you're running around outside, it reflects heat and light back out, right? There are even some fabrics that have a metallized back, so that will reflect it even better. Obviously, you know, a piece of metal is going to reflect light back even better than a white finish will. So what you're looking for is high RS. That's how it'll be labeled in the fabric. So that's reflected sunlight. How much is kicked back out? How much of it never enters the building? But if you're trying on the converse side, as we've mentioned, UV is different. If you want to protect furnishings and not have the UV hit the floor and wash it out, or the paintings, all right, then you want a darker fabric. Why? Because again, going back to that t-shirt example, it takes it and it heats up that t-shirt. So those dark fibers in that fabric will actually take that heat and absorb it and not let it penetrate. So dark strands will absorb UV and prevent it from passing into the room. So if you're conscious or your main consideration there is stopping UV as opposed to heat, what you want to look at on the fabric card again is that TS, or that's transmitted or the absorbed sunlight. So it's the solar transmissions. You want to low that so it's not letting much light into that room or not letting much UV into the room. Okay, quiz time again. What fabric properties should you look for in a space with valuable artwork? So they have a Monet or a Monet or Picasso or something in that room. What is the best choice of fabric? I'll give you a second or two to think. The answer is both, right? You want dark colored fabric, so you want to absorb as much of that UV, not let it get to the paintings. And then fabrics with a lower openness, so you want as little light coming in as possible, and then what does, you want to absorb as much of the UV as possible with the dark color. So a low openness with a dark color is going to be your best choice for a shading fabric in that type of environment to protect the artwork. Okay, here's another question. What fabric composition might be a good choice for a facade that has a gorgeous view, so you want to see out to the ocean, and you've got lots of sunlight hitting that window? So I'll give you a second or two to think about this one. This goes back to the weaves that we talked about. The answer is a twill. What is a twill again? That's where you use two different colors of fabric, right? So you're going to have two different colors woven together. And the twill is right because, number one, what's he want? He wants a gorgeous view. That tells me that he's got something he really wants to look at. And as we talked about, you want to have a dark fabric then so that you're peering through it, so you have that contrast so that your eye can see out. All right, so a dark on the inside. And then the fact that they're saying there's still going to be a lot of sunlight coming in, well, the best choice again for there is the white on the outside of the fabric to reflect that heat and light away. So minimize that so you're not going to have that glare. All right, human environments. What are you going to do if you have a shade outside, a shade in a bathroom? What are the best fabric choices for that? Well, the good news is there's the American Standard International Society down there that rates fabrics based on antimicrobial certifications. Basically, will it support the growth of fungus and mold and all that kind of stuff? So you want fabrics that don't do that. The worst you can do is have some kind of frilly fabric in a bathroom. You get that shade wet, you roll that thing up on the tube, you leave it up there, 2, 3, 4 weeks before you unroll it again, and all those little wet microbes start to go to work. And when you roll that thing down again, you're going to have some pretty ugly staining and some, just some nasty looking stuff on that shade. So you want to take a close look at this. Good things to look at is, again, you can check the fabric for this certification by the American Standards Association International there. Also know that fiberglass compositions, so we talked about earlier, they're essentially waterproof. So they're not going to allow, the water to stain or stretch or affect that fabric. So take a look at that if you're going to have shades in any place where you're going to have humid environments or the potential for that shade to get wet. You certainly want to make sure it's not going to pick up those microbes and start the mold or fungus chain. There's a funny picture here. Privacy. It's like an ostrich sticking his head in the ground. So certainly privacy is a big deal with people. They don't want them looking into bedrooms, don't want them looking into bathrooms, certain times of the day. You just want to maintain your privacy, right? The key here is that privacy is subjective, right? I mean, my idea of privacy is different than yours. Some people may want a complete blackout. Some may not. Some may say, as long as I'm not right up against the window, I'm not that concerned. If they can't make out who I am, I'm not that concerned. So the reason this slide is up here is this is what we call a privacy fabric, which is like less than 1% light transmission. And this is kind of the worst case scenario where it's dark outside and there's a light in the background. So what you'll see with this is from left to right, adjacent to the fabric, this is us taking a picture of somebody who's right on top of that fabric. I mean, your nose is like an inch from the fabric, all right? You know it's a human being, you know it's a body, you know somebody's looking out the window, all right? But if you're 1 foot away from that fabric in the middle, you're probably gonna, I'm not even sure that's a human there. You may see shadows as he moves back and forth. And then if you're 2 feet away, you basically see nothing. So some people may say that is appropriate. That's privacy enough for me. Other people may say, no, it's not. You know, I want 100% blackout. I don't want to know if anyone's in that building. So again, this is a discussion that you need to have with your client on what is his or her definition of privacy. Do you want to not see all out? Do you want to just make sure you can't tell who it is? You know, in this case, there's, in my opinion, there's no way of knowing if that's a man or a woman, even when you're adjacent to the fabric. So it's a subjective thing that you need to discuss with your homeowners. Because if you go with a blackout, you know, that's great. Nobody's ever going to know you're in there. But once again, you're never going to be able to see out of that fabric. You're going to lose that ability to maintain that view with a blackout fabric. The only way around that was to be to put 2 rollers in there, one with blackout and one with sunscreen, which is all great, but then it starts to get expensive. You need larger pockets in the windows and you go down, you know, there's good and bad choices with all this. Okay, so the definition here, privacy fabric, means it's translucent and has less than 1% light coming through it. Kind of like we showed you on those previous slides, there's no distinct visibility. The fabric kind of glows. You will see shadows and that kind of stuff. So that's what we call a privacy fabric. So it does still let some light and visibility into the room. On the other one, room darkening. So I want to caution you on a term that's thrown around quite a bit in the shading company, and that's blackout. Okay, because there are blackout fabrics, which means no light comes through, but a blackout fabric does not guarantee a blackout installation, right? So if you're looking at this picture here, we've got blackout fabrics, but that's not a blackout installation. As you see the lights coming in through the middle and on the sides of the shades, even at the bottom where they're, you know, matching the bottom still there. So I think what you want to try and school yourself in is to talk about, you know, room darkening, because, you know, in my 12, 13 years of sales, I have had a couple times where I said blackout and the homeowners, I'm talking about blackout fabric, homeowner's mind automatically jumps to the conclusion that it's a blackout installation, that we're in that room, they're going to get no sunlight, right? And I'll caution you, the sun in many cases is a lot like water. You know, if you're building a boat or you're building a roof, all it takes is just one little, you know, water's going to find its way through. Same with the sunlight here. If you're not caulking, if you don't have side channels, if you don't spend a lot of time making sure that you sealed off all avenues of light, it will bounce around and find its way into that room. So I always try to be careful when we're talking about blackout and try and exercise that from your vocabulary, unless you're really intent on having 100% light proof application, which I think you'll see on the next slide. So here is a blackout. So you've got the blackout fabric, you've got the side channels, you got probably a little woolen thing on the bottom where the shade hits the ledge, so that you've got a total blackout room. Notice when you have a blackout application, you usually need that side channel. So as it shows in the middle there, the fabric moves down that U channel, and that prevents the light from bouncing around the edge and then coming back out. So that's a blackout application. You really only need this, in my opinion, if you have someone who is just insistent in their bedroom that they want absolutely no light coming in. Home theater, if they're putting a lot of money into home theater, that usually requires a complete blackout application. But in most cases, I'm going to back up a slide here. The room darkening is good enough, because you don't want to see that 2 or 3 inches of metal hanging in the room, you know, that the side channels require. Or it's a lot of planning with your architect to recess those into the wall and make them hidden. Okay, volatile organic low VOCs. This is again smell. So most solar fabrics, I'm talking about the fiberglass as well as the polyester, they are coated with this so that they last longer, they're stronger, they roll up without scratching the surface. You can imagine if a shade's rolled up and down, you don't want the actual rubbing of the fabric against each other to start wearing out the fabric. They're PVC coated, all right? And that can create a smell. Again, that new car smell. It's cool, the new car people like it, but they hate it on things in their house. So most of our installers know that you can usually get this 100% rid of if once it's installed, if you can let those shades just hang down, it'll air out in 2 or 3 days and you'll never smell it again. But there are, quite honestly, designers and homeowners out there who don't want them right from the get-go. So once again, there's a third-party agency out there called Green Guard that tests and determines which fabrics are using no or very little PVC, so you won't even have that off-gassing, that smell right from the get-go. So if that is a concern to you, maybe if you got someone in that house that's super sensitive to it, they've got allergies or something like that, what you want to look for, again, to stop that smell is the Green Guard certification. So we're winding up in the end. This is the summary. As I said, again, when I finish this slide, you're free to exit the webinar, or if you're interested in how Lutron addresses some of these, I encourage you to stay on, and I'll show you where this information is and where some tools and are on the Lutron information so that you can accurately pick fabrics that meet those guidelines. But the summary here is, this is where 3 points tell you what you're going to tell them. I just told you. Now it's the wrap up. So we talked here about, openness factor, which is how tight the weave is. The tighter the weave, the less light that comes in. So the greater percentage, a 10% openness factor, lets more light in than a 3 or a 1%. We talked about color. So, white fabric is very good at reflecting the light and heat back out. A dark fabric, on the other hand, allows you to see through it easier and absorbs more UV. So there's a trade-off there. The fabric weave, so we talked about, the basket weave, very tight, very regimented. This is the type of fabric that can be cut and sewn and put together without, having to worry about that seam falling apart. Then the twill fabrics, right? The twill is defined by, it's still kind of a basket weave fabric, but it's 2 colors, right? You'll typically have a dark side and a light side. And in most applications, you're going to want the dark side inside for visibility and the lighter side on the outside of the shade to reflect the light back out into the air. Fabric composition, the difference between the polyester and the fiberglass. Fiberglass is smaller, stronger. You get more holes in the fabric, even with the same openness factor. Most people find it easier to look through the fiberglass composition than the polyester, and it doesn't stretch as much. It's a tighter fabric, but we caution you again, if you really cut a hard crease in a fiberglass fabric, it's gonna be very difficult to get that crease out. Or with a polyester, it relaxes and flexes more, and you have the opportunity, if you leave that shade down for a few days, that crease is gonna go away. Acoustic performance, remember the noise coefficient. So if you're looking at reducing echo, obviously for a music room or a home theater, also, if I were going to start a business today, the business I think I would start is installing home offices with all this COVID stuff going around. I think there's going to be a big market for everybody having home offices with teleconferencing capability. So if you had that area and you wanted shades in there, the noise coefficient would be a big deal for that. Heat and UV, remember they're different, right? You get hot at a fireplace, but you're not going to get a suntan. Conversely, you're going to get a sunburn on the mountain, but you're not going to get hot. So they're 2 different things, and you address them differently. So with heat, you want a white back, shoot that light, shoot that heat back out. To protect against UV, you want a dark fabric so it will absorb that ultraviolet light, and less of it will get to your floors and your paintings and your furnishings. Privacy, again, we talked about that, is subjective. Blackout fabrics, of course, is the most private, but that doesn't allow any view. So once you move from that, you can move into different openness factors. There are some fabrics that are 1% or less that we call them privacy fabrics, and that's the example we showed with the person against the window. So is that good enough or is that not? It's yours or the homeowner's decision. And then environmental factors, we covered that with like the showers and the damp locations and how you want to look for that U.S. standards label that says that it's got the it's not going to have the microbes in it. They will not multiply. It's antimicrobial certified. And again, fiberglass fabrics, again, are essentially waterproof, as we indicated. All right, so that is the end of the official part of the CEU. Again, if you want it for credit, make sure you got to Western or to me that information on your name, your email, your AIA number, phone number, and then we'll actually file and send you a confirmation that we've got the CEU handled for you. So those of you who want to stick around, these next slides are not part of the CEU because I'm not allowed to talk about a specific company, but since we're ending it, I'm going to have a few slides here on what you learned, how do you find it and use it with Lutron. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I highly encourage you to get from your Lutron rep or go to Lutron website and get it is our fabric selection reference guide. This is a very instructive, very easy to use cheat sheet on what fabrics are best for what applications, since you're not going to memorize all 1,500 Lutron fabrics. I've worked for the company for 12 years and I don't know them all. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures of this, but you can download this or get this from us. So, we've got the applications. What fabrics are best for wide windows? Which fabrics are best for loud spaces where you want that dampening? What fabrics are best for beautiful views? What fabrics for privacy but not total blackout? So we'll give you what is your application, a description of why we chose these fabrics, and then which fabrics in the Lutron line are the best for that particular application. So that's the top half of the sheet. Here's the bottom half. What do you want to do if you got intense heat? What do you want to do, which I like this one, where you want the best of both worlds. You want to see out and then get rid of the heat. So those are the dual-sided fabrics, the twills we talked about. Master bedrooms and nurseries where you may need blackouts. And then, where you've got sunlight, artwork, or precious home furnishings. These would be the ones that are going to eat up the UV. So if you'll notice on the bottom one, you've got the charcoal and the grays and the slate, so a darker color there to absorb that UV. So just a very, very handy, quick cheat sheet. These are 80% of the applications or questions you're going to get from homeowners. And you can make yourself an expert really quickly just by having this sheet around. The second thing and the last thing we want to talk to you about is the Lutron Fabric website. So it's www.lutronfabrics.com. You go in there, as you see in the the top box where the web address is. There's the guy's head there. I highly recommend you just click on that. You put your name, your address, your email. Why is that important? Because then we can send you free samples. So when you click on a cart, if you find a fabric you want, you can click on that and order directly from Lutron to have that fabric sample sent to you. And then you can check, as you see on the bottom, by application. You want roller shades, wood blinds, honeycomb shades. What is the application? And then in the middle, I've highlighted the search tool. So this next slide will say, you click the search tool. So if you go into there, this is again another quick, cheat sheet for you. So you click on the things that are important to you. So maybe I need or want a white shade. I want it to be a sheer shade, so something I can see through. And I know I've got a big window. So I want a fabric that's at least 108 inches wide. So that's it's over 9 feet. All right, so that's the criteria. Those are what's important to me. So if I click search after I hit those options, I'll find out there's actually 49 different fabrics in the Lutron portfolio that meet that. And if I want to look at a particular fabric, and I just picked one out at random here, this basket weave 27 oyster, I click on that fabric, and then I get a bigger picture of it. But what's important is the little details. So the blue box there, if I click on that, this is where you get all that hard information that you just spent the last hour learning about. So you'll see the openness factor. So this, for instance, this shade, even though I clicked on the 5%, I'll notice it's available in a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 10. There's also that noise reduction coefficient. So this is a 0.5, or that's pretty good, 50%. It's dual-sided, so the front and back of a fabric, it's 2 different colors. Again, the light side typically goes toward the outside, the dark side inside. What's the maximum usable width? So I can go 124 inches. So this is a really wide possible shade. Railroaded, does that mean I can turn it sideways and sew it? It does. So those are all options, and there's actually more. I didn't copy all that, but this is where all the technical details on that fabric that you just learned about will be listed. And then finally, if this is something that I wanted, I can click on the cart up there, and you can see I just ordered myself 2 samples to be drop shipped to whatever address you fill up when you put your name and address on there. So I've got 2 samples. I always recommend you get 2, one for you, the homeowner, for you to keep if you're a designer, architect, and then one to go to the homeowner so that you both got the same fabrics. And then, you're good to go. You can order, I think, up to 6 of any particular fabric. And I think they let you order like 12 at a time, 12 different fabrics at a time. So we're real generous. The fabric sizes, they fit like in a 8.5 by 11 envelope. If you want any big pieces of fabric, then those you have to order independently, and we will charge for that. But all these smaller size fabrics, we send these out for free from Lutron. And the fastest and the best way to get them is to do it here. It's a lot more difficult to call the rep or call Lutron and try and figure out the model numbers and all that kind of stuff. Once you click on a fabric here, the model number is known, and it's there's no doubt you're getting what you want. So with that, I am a few minutes over, but not too bad. So I want to thank you for attending. Hopefully this was informative. Jim, if you're still on the line, did you want to say goodbye before we hang up here?
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. We'll include, you should get it probably Monday morning. We'll include a link to this video, and we will include a link for the fabric reference guide, the presentation as well. And then we'll also send you information on the fabric site. And if we can do anything at all to help you with any of your shading needs, please don't hesitate to reach out to give us a call. Mark, thank you for a very informative spin. Not everybody knows this was Mark's first at bat on this presentation, and I can attest it's very hard to make them interesting when it's your first attempt at it. For sure, Mark, you knocked it out of the park, buddy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks, guys.